Have you ever pondered the root cause of the conflict between Israel and Hamas? To fully grasp the complexities of this issue, we must first journey back to the year 1948. It was then that the State of Israel was established, a move that resulted in the displacement of many Palestinian Arabs from their homes. This displacement, a source of deep-seated resentment, set the stage for the strife that was to follow. Fast forward to the late 1980s, a time marked by the rise of Hamas. This organization emerged as a reaction to Israel's occupation, positioning itself as a defender of the Palestinian cause. Hamas, an acronym for the Islamic Resistance Movement, would go on to become a major player in the ongoing conflict. The seeds of this conflict were sown decades ago, and understanding this history is crucial to comprehend the present situation. Now that we have a grasp of the historical context, let's delve into some of the key events that have shaped this conflict. The First Intifada, a grassroots uprising against Israeli occupation, erupted in the late 1980s. It was a period marked by civil disobedience, protests, and widespread strikes. The world watched as images of stone-throwing Palestinian youths confronting heavily armed Israeli soldiers flooded international media. This uprising was a signal of the deep-seated frustration and anger felt by Palestinians living under occupation. Fast forward to the early 90s, a glimmer of hope shone with the signing of the Oslo Accords. This agreement marked the first face-to-face agreement between the government of Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization. It was here that both sides acknowledged each other's right to exist. For a moment, it seemed as though peace was within reach, but sadly, this was not to last. In the early 2000s, the Second Intifada erupted. This time, the uprising was far more violent, involving suicide bombings and military operations. The violence was intense, the death toll was high, and the hope that had been kindled by the Oslo Accords was rapidly extinguished. Then, we move into the period of the Gaza Wars. Beginning in 2008, these conflicts have been characterized by a series of military offensives by Israel in the Gaza Strip. The stated aim, to stop rocket attacks by Hamas. The impact, a high civilian death toll, widespread destruction, and a deepening of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. These key events highlight the cyclical nature of the conflict. Each event, each uprising, each war, seems to only deepen the divide, harden the hatred, and cement the sense of mutual distrust. And at the heart of it all, are the civilians on both sides who bear the brunt of the violence. These events have left deep scars and have perpetuated a cycle of violence that continues to this day. So where does that leave us today? We find ourselves in the lingering aftershocks of the 2021 Israel-Hamas conflict, yet another chapter in this long-standing dispute. A ceasefire may have been declared, but the echoes of warfare still resonate, serving as a grim reminder of the region's volatile reality. International players, like the United States and United Nations, continue to grapple with their roles in this complex scenario. Their diplomatic efforts oscillate between calls for peace, defending allies, and grappling with the intricate puzzle of Middle East politics. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza deepens. The inhabitants face a grim reality of infrastructural damage, lack of basic amenities, and an uncertain future. The world watches as these ordinary people bear the brunt of a conflict they didn't choose, their lives overshadowed by a narrative larger than their individual existences. The conflict persists with no clear resolution in sight and the cost being paid by ordinary people on both sides. In the past few minutes, we have traced the roots of the Israel-Hamas conflict, examined key events, and looked at the present situation. The genesis of the conflict goes back to the early 20th century, when political and territorial disputes arose between Jewish and Arab communities in Palestine. This discord has been punctuated by several key events, including the Six-Day War of the late 60s and the First Intifada in the late 80s. Today, the conflict remains unresolved, with both sides asserting their rights and suffering tragic losses. The complexity of the issue lies not only in its historical roots, but also in its geopolitical ramifications. It demands critical thinking, understanding, and empathy. It invites us to dig deeper, to question our preconceived notions, and to engage in informed conversations. While it's an intricate and deeply rooted issue, understanding the history and context is the first step towards advocating for peace and justice in the region.